Today we are going to talk about writing proportions. It is important to note that our goal today is to simply write proportions. We are only focusing on setup. We are not focusing on solving today. Okay, so we just want to practice writing and making sure that we are correctly writing and setting up proportions. When we write our proportions, we always start with our word ratio. With proportions, our order doesn't matter as much, but it does need to be consistent. And what I mean by that is with unit rate problems, we needed to make sure to have something specific on the bottom in the denominator. For proportions, it doesn't matter as long as throughout the entire problem, we are consistent. Once we have our word ratio, we set up a skeleton proportion. A skeleton proportion would be two fraction bars separated by an equal sign. So the very first thing you'll always do, read the situation, write your word ratio, and set up your skeleton proportion. Okay, so we've got a couple of different types of problems here. The first one is when we have parts. We have parts that we are looking for. We're using parts in our proportion. Here it says in a bag of blue and red M&Ms, the ratio of blue to red is 3:5. So blue is to that 3, and red is to that 5. It says if there are 60 red, how many are blue? So I'm talking about the parts here, simply the parts. I don't care about the total number of M&Ms. So I set up my word ratio. I'm comparing blue M&Ms to red. Blue to red. From here, I set up my skeleton proportion. Awesome. So now from here, I just fill in my information that I already have. Blue. Well, I have 3 blue to 5 red. Then it says if there are, this is one ratio. So this is our ratio. So I need that on the same fraction bar. That is my ratio. 3:5 can also be written 3:5, and that's what we transfer over here. Then it says if there are 60 red, so I put 60 in my red. This is why that word ratio is incredibly helpful. 60 red, how many are blue? I don't know the blue. The blue is unknown, so I leave a variable. This right here is all we are looking for today. I want to see your word ratio, your skeleton proportion, and then your information filled in. We are not going any further today. We are just making sure we are confident in our setup. Okay, so that was an example using parts. Let's try an example using totals. So here we have a total problem, and I'm telling you that, but let's look at why it's a total problem so you can use that information for future problems. It says in a bag of yellow and green M&Ms, for every 4 green M&Ms, there are 5 yellow M&Ms. So we have 4 green and 5 yellow. Guess I could make that another color. Okay, it says if there are 54 M&Ms in the bag, so that means 54 total. 54 total. How many are yellow? So I'm given a total and I'm comparing that total to yellow. So my word ratio this time should be yellow to total. I don't need green included in my proportion specifically by itself. Now I'm going to set up my word ratio. My skeleton proportion. So now I need to fill in. I already know that there are 5 yellow, but the ratio here of green to yellow was 4:5. I'm not using that 4 directly, but I don't want to put 54 here. because that's telling me the total in the bag. The 54 goes over here in its own separate proportion or ratio, excuse me. Okay, so I need to know what the total is in regards to the 5 yellows. So I take the total of 4 and 5 combined, which is 9, and that's what goes here. So if I have 4 green M&Ms and 5 yellow M&Ms, then I have 9 M&Ms. So my total is 9. Then I'm given a total of the entire bag. I don't know how many yellows there are, so that's where I put my variable. If you have questions on that, please make sure to ask. There's one more thing that we will do, and that is pulling information from a table. So here it says that a chef increases the amount of ingredients in a recipe to make a proportional recipe. That's so if we make a smaller batch or a bigger batch or the regular size batch, all of our batches will taste the same. So we keep our recipes proportional. The new recipe has 6 cups of black beans. Write a proportion that gives the number of X of tomatoes in the new recipe. So here what's nice is I'm comparing black beans and tomatoes. And my table actually already has my word ratio. So I'm just going to rewrite that. Black beans to tomatoes. So then I set up my skeleton proportion. And I actually can just fill in as long as I make sure that I'm putting things in the correct spot. So here, my original recipe, the ratio, oh, I'm sorry, you couldn't see that. My original recipe, the ratio was 1.5 to 1. Black beans is on top, so I keep my black beans on top to 1. And then my new recipe, this will be my ratio for my new recipe, 6 cups of black beans to I don't know how many tomatoes. So this case, our variable is over here. Our variable, our unknown, can be in any one of these 4 spots. All right, let's try a couple more examples. It says the distance traveled by John and Ryan is 3 to 4. The distance they traveled together was 35 miles. How many miles did each one travel? So what am I comparing here? What am I comparing here? Here I have John and Ryan, but I have a total. And it says how many did each one travel? Let's focus on John today. Okay, so I can go ahead and say I'm comparing John to the total. So my word ratio would be John to total. I set up my skeleton proportion. What would my first ratio be? My John to total with my first ratio. 3 would go on top because we already know that John had 3 miles. I don't put Ryan on the bottom. Instead, I put the combined total of miles. 3 plus 4 is 7. The distance they traveled together, we know, is 35. So our variable then goes on top. And that's all I need to do today. But we could go ahead and look at Ryan as well. So if we had Ryan to total, we could do that as well. What would my first ratio be here? We would use 4 to 7. What would my ratio be here? Good. We still don't know Ryan's individual miles if they traveled 35 together. So our ratio would be X to 35. We've got one more example to try together. It says you put 1 gallon of corn for every 40 acres for deer feed. How much feed could you put on 65 acres? What would my word ratio be? What am I comparing? Good. I'm comparing gallons to acres. After I write my word ratio, my next step is to what? Skeleton proportion. What will my first ratio be here? Make sure that we keep everything in order. Good. 1 gallon to 40 acres. Where will my variable go in my second ratio? Will it go in the numerator or the denominator? Good. We have 65 acres as a number. We are missing our gallons. And that's all.